Good day, everyone. Welcome back to your favorite show on a bright, sunny, hot Friday afternoon. How are you coping and finding this heat, Tinashe?
I'm continuously tired. I think I prefer the rains.
You prefer the rains?
Yeah, I prefer the rains. It cools us off, but it is beautiful. I think, like I always say, the vegetation, it's green, and there's a bit of vibrancy that I like, but certainly not the weather. I'm not a fan of hot weather.
Okay. You're sitting on the part of the table today that normally has something very interesting, but given that it's you, what are you drinking today?
Yeah, no, I thought, let me be...
You're not having tea? You're not using the heat of tea to cool you down?
No, something that, as we were growing up, Coke was the go-to to thirst one's... to quench one's thirst. So that's exactly what I'm doing. And lots of ice. Coke Zero.
It's the zero version. So you're trying to run away from the sugar?
Yeah, I think I stopped drinking original Coke a long time ago. And Coke Zero, it's an acquired taste, and I think I've acquired the taste.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so you actually prefer it to normal Coke?
I do. I prefer Coke Zero to the normal. I've acquired the taste, so yeah.
Okay. Well, today we're joined
it's something that I actually have in common with Elon Musk. Really? I can have lots of these.
Like on a typical day, how many?
Well, one. I try to actually avoid.
Okay. So you're a little bit disciplined.
But yeah, the affinity is there.
Okay. Interesting. And today we have our colleague, Collen, capital market player and technologist. Well, what are you drinking on your side of the table? What's interesting in this orange juice?
I'm proudly Zimbabwean.
Okay, so I'm guessing Mazoe.
Yes, Mazoe orange, very unique and specific to Zim. Mm-hmm. So I'm proud of that. Yeah.
And is that all? Is there gin in there, vodka, anything more interesting, or it's just
unspoiled?
Unspoiled. Oh my gosh. Have you always been a teetotaler like Tinashe, or you're just, going through a dry patch?
Certainly not a teetotaler.
That's good. That's good. You're my kind of human being.
Of course, I have to ensure that my system, I spare it sometimes,
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I was dry all of January. I'm having some Johnny Walker, courtesy of a good friend of mine, Weedzo, who's in the audience. Cheers.
So how come Weedzo gets to buy you a very expensive Johnny Walker, and he doesn't extend the courtesy to, some of us?
Well, I'm sure you've heard this said many times in pubs and bars. Atitenge ma grocery.
I thought you were gonna say kisses go by favor.
No, not at all. So look, if you join the bandwagon, I'm sure you will be accommodated. If you just upgrade yourself to more interesting beverages. So Collen, you're a capital market player like I am, at least, and you're also a technologist. And what's interesting about you as well is that not only do you do business in Zimbabwe, you do business in Kenya as well. So, but perhaps for the benefit of our audience, could you just walk us through a little bit of your journey as a business person and entrepreneur, and how you ended up in these two markets?
Thanks, Rufaro. Yeah, it's been quite a long journey, probably close to 20 years now. Basically in the capital markets. Started off in the share registry space. Back then, the service was being provided as an added service by banks. Mm-hmm. So there was a very big gap for someone to come in and offer a dedicated independent service. So we occupied that space, set up CopServe, and that is where the story started. And we managed to get quite a few very good clients. And along the way, we also, started exploring the region, East Africa, Southern Africa, of course, our neighboring countries, just with the share registry business.
Okay.
As our markets were transforming and becoming more automated, we saw an opportunity in at least starting by automating ourselves in terms of our registry. tested ourselves in that area and realized that we had some capacity that we could extend beyond share registry services, and started providing platforms for other members of the capital markets ecosystem, stockbrokers, fund managers, and the like, until eventually we felt we were capable of putting together an entire market platform for the entire capital markets, starting with the stock exchange, stock market, and then extending into commodities. So along the way, opportunities continued to pop up. This is what saw the birth of FinSec as an alternative trading platform, having recognized the need for there to be an alternative platform for securities that probably at that time could not perfectly meet what was fitting into the stock market space. And the same opportunities that we're seeing here were also quite abundant in the region. Kenya was happening around 2006, 2007, having benefited from their transition in terms of their political transition, and it was very fertile in terms of innovation, creativity, and we found ourselves also being part of that process. And obviously it then benefited us back home, because the ideas that we're picking there informed how we're driving the business here. And in between Kenya and Zimbabwe, we also managed to get into Zambia, Tanzania, and Malawi. So the long and short of what we do is we provide capital markets infrastructure, and then the backup services. So by that, what do I mean by that? I just mean that capital markets, we're just automating markets. The central market, as well as the other members of the ecosystem of the market. We have also looked at replicating what happens in the capital market, so that exactly the same model is put into the commodity markets.
Okay.
So what we do, the long and short, you may hear we do all sorts of things, but the overriding thing is that we just facilitate markets.
Okay, fantastic. And I think everybody is impressed with the Kenya story, just what they've done with the economy. I think Tinashe will tell anyone who will listen ad nauseum that in 1990 Zimbabwe actually had a bigger economy than Kenya. But today Kenya's 5 times the size of Zimbabwe from a GDP perspective. So as somebody who plays both markets, what's your view in terms of the Kenyan capital markets? What are some of the things that they are getting right, or that we can learn from here in Zimbabwe?
Well, we can't isolate the capital markets dynamics from the wider economic dynamics in Kenya. So capital markets are very sensitive to what is happening in the wider economy. So in terms of the fundamentals, in terms of the economic fundamentals in Kenya, somehow they got that right. Their political transition was actually followed by the economic transition, opening up markets, free market forces, and with that they had a very thriving capital market that was supporting the economic development. They do have very strong and robust regulatory framework, which instills confidence in the markets. The stable economy as well helps in terms of enhancing that confidence. But last but not least, innovation and technology. Them embracing that and allowing innovation to thrive, both in the capital markets and in the wider financial services, actually has had also a very positive impact. All that is what we've been learning from Kenya.
Okay.
So if you look at the Zimbabwe market, a lot of your competitors fell by the wayside. What would you say was the ingredient to your success? Why did you survive? Because everyone else could have done exactly what you did, but what made you different from all your other competitors?
Well, the situation we are in is not easy, but it's not totally unique. It's something that a lot of the aspects of it you find in many parts of Africa. The key is to adapt. You just have to adapt, and you can't sit back and say the conditions are not conducive for me to carry on, because unless there is war, people are always going to feed. They're not going to need shelter. They're going to need to survive, and that need to survive forces economic activity to take place. And when that economic activity is taking place, you must adjust yourself to be where the economic activity is happening. So I get surprised when people feel, the environment is not right for the capital markets and all that. There is business activity happening, and we need to follow where the business activity is taking place. There is the issue of we have become too informal. The formal sector is shrinking. The informal sector is, you follow the informal sector. You then come in with solutions there, and it is your solutions that then can formalize the formal sector. How do you do that? You must innovate, because the reason why economic activity sometimes move away from the formal sector is because of the frictions. If the frictions are too much, if the efficiencies are not there, then the economy will go where it is easier. So your solutions must address that, must address costs, must address risks, must address efficiencies, must address convenience. The moment you do that, in that informal sector, you can thrive. So that is what has been driving us to say, what are the demands in terms of how economic activity is happening in our country. And I think that's exactly what Kenya has done very well. For example, when we talk banking, we always think of the formal banking that we are used to. But Kenya, their banking effectively goes beyond the formal banking. There is something called SACCOs. I don't know if you've heard about SACCOs.
Yeah.
About 6 million of them registered. Not all of them.
So what is a SACCO? It's an acronym I'm not familiar with.
Savings and credit cooperatives and societies.
Okay.
Yeah. So you get together and you pool your savings. And
is it like my rounds?
Kind of.
But by association. So it could be farmers, small-scale farmers.
Yes.
By region, it could be health workers. So they organize that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you look at that, in a rural setting, people can get together, farmers, they collaborate, they pool their savings, they have a small fund, and anybody who has an emergency can borrow from that, even at very high interest rates.
Okay.
Because the income from that interest is a return for all members. Because, it's basic business principle. Your capital is there, and whatever comes out of the capital is your dividend. So there's an incentive to lend, there's an incentive to manage the risk, and there's an incentive to save. 6 million of those.
Wow.
Probably around 1 million are very, very functional. But the point I'm trying to make is some of them are actually got so big that they were even bigger than the banks that they were banking with.
Wow.
To the point that they actually now do a takeover of the bank. This is a community base. So every company, almost every big company, their employees will be part of a SACCO. SACCOs can be sector-based, can be company-based, can be so many of them. You find an executive in Kenya being in maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 SACCOs. So when he needs liquidity and all that, he has multiple options.
And he doesn't have to go to a conventional bank.
Yes. So you now look at SACCOs, you move a step up, microfinance, huge business. Then you go to the banks. So you now have a situation where the economic activity and liquidity and access to finance and financial inclusion thrives. When it thrives, it oils the rest of the economic activity. So it is that adaptability where people do not just sit back and say, We are 300 kilometers away from a banking institution, so we are left out. We can't do anything. We are hopeless. So it is that adaptability, embracing technology. Now, when you see the Safarikoms of this world coming in, they are coming into a culture of adaptability, about embracing innovation and all that. So in terms of their scale, it is helped by that mentality, which is what we need to be learning from. So we are trying, because we are becoming a global village. Some of these concepts are finding their way all over, but we need to change that mindset to say, in any situation, there are opportunities. Always there are opportunities. As long as we are feeding, as long as we are surviving, as long as we have a decent population like we have, there are opportunities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm curious, because one of the things that we discuss here all the time about Zimbabwean business people, and a lot of them do extremely well here, and their competence and ingenuity is demonstrable. But we tend to be very inward looking. And, as you just mentioned, our population is only, 15, 16 million.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at the region, it's, multiples of that. And a lot of business leaders in our country simply, for whatever reason, are inward looking, and they never meaningfully expand outside. So what experience did you have that made you look outside Zimbabwe? Although I suspect that, when you mentioned that you started looking outside in 2007, 2008, I've got my own I've got my own guess as to what might have encouraged you to look outside at that particular point in time. But perhaps I'll leave it to you to tell us in your own words.
Okay, just a correction. We did not start looking outside around 2006, 2007. We had started much earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think around 2000, we were going into places like Tanzania, do an IPO and get out. So we now had some kind of familiarity. But of course, when the situation around 2007 happened, we had options, because we were already now familiar with the region. But having said that, so yes, we are inward looking, in the sense that I think we, as Zimbabwe, we moved so far ahead of our peers at some point, that perhaps we went into this sense of comfort that
we're ahead and we're better.
Yes, and we don't need anybody, and we don't need anything from anybody. But when you go out there, of course, we have our reputation, the perception on us has taken quite a beating, in recent times. But still, there is an enduring perception regarding our, competence, our work ethic, our entrepreneurial, capabilities and all that. So we have potential that we have not really exploited fully in terms of looking up north as opposed to looking down south. Our capabilities and all that are quite relevant in quite a number of areas that we're not fortunate enough to have the kind of infrastructure that had advanced as much as we did. That I can tell you. Even when I got to Kenya in 2006, 2007, our situation was bad. But just looking at our stock market, for example, the size of their stock market was a fraction of ours. By listing, by market cap, by the advancements we had made. It looked unbelievable then for those who were outside. That I would present myself there, and obviously they are reading about Zim. And then you tell them, and it was at our peak, I think we had 80 listed companies. For them, they are thinking you are running away to come for opportunities. I'm telling them, no, you have 43, 44 listings. We have 80, and everybody will go silent. So we had really progressed. Of course, there's been a reversal of that. But the point I'm trying to make is at that point, we were still underestimating how far ahead we had gone. And we did not exploit that. We have been caught and we have been kind of overtaken, but we are not too far behind.
From a technology standpoint, or in other aspects as well?
In many aspects. So, we are providing technology solutions in the, heart of the Kenyan capital markets in technology coming from Zimbabwe.
So you actually write the software in Zimbabwe,
Yes.
and you build the products here,
Yes.
and then you execute
Yes.
in Nairobi.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Because that part of the world is known as, when people
Tech
ask,
hub.
yeah, when they talk about the Silicon Valley, Africa's version, they talk about Nairobi,
Town.
Kenya, and Cape Town.
Lagos.
There is a lot of substance in the claim that they make, the claims that they make. There's a lot of substance.
Okay.
However, although there is substance, they market themselves well.
Ah, okay. Or there's
And-
less negative headlines like
Exactly.
coming out of Zimbabwe, which probably helps
Yeah.
a whole bunch.
So you see, what happens is when you have a story and you are confident and you sell it, people will place value in your story depending on how confidently you sell it, and then it has a spiraling effect in propelling that story. I'll tell you an example without really being very specific. So we did deploy a certain platform in Kenya, in which Kenya then became famed for being the first country in the world to
Have such a platform.
yes. And it wasn't very sophisticated because we did that platform, but they marketed it so well in terms of
It
saying,
became theirs.
yes, it's
They owned it.
first in the world. And they, global platforms were recognizing that. And on one such platform, representatives from Zim were so impressed by that. Then they went to the Kenyans to ask who did the,
And it was you.
and they was shocked to say, why are you asking? Because it came from your country. You see. So we have so many such solutions that we are not proud enough to position to where they actually belong, because we are just accepting that our situation has become quite hopeless.
Yeah. So this actually raises a question and challenge to you, actually, because I've heard variants of what he said in many different forums. That one of the problems that we have as Zimbabweans is that we're very good and clear at articulating what's not working, what's going wrong, the failures, right? And we and certainly on this show we're guilty of doing a lot of that. But there's a lot to celebrate that's still happening in spite of all our problems. We have great entrepreneurs. We have Zimbabweans building phenomenal products. There are places in this country that are incredibly beautiful, where it would be fantastic to spend a holiday, that we just don't talk about in any meaningful way compared to how much we harp about, all the things that are not working and all the problems. So do you think that it's a cultural mindset problem that we have as Zimbabweans, where we just focus on the negatives and just are silent on the positives? What do you think is going on there?
Well, first of all, the framing, I would change the framing of the question. I don't think it's a problem. I think that self-criticism and societies that are critical of themselves, that are hard on themselves, tend to do far better than societies that, are continuously loading their efforts. And here I'm looking at Europe, continental Europe, compared to America. So if you go through social media or any media, when you look at America, there is heavy criticism. If you look at someone that you admire so much, Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, never a day went through where they were not being criticized.
They're being attacked incessantly.
They're being attacked incessantly, and I think it's part of the culture. The part of the culture is to saying that we can do better. right? So that's what I read from. And I think it's also very true of Zimbabwe. What we're really saying is Zimbabwe can do better and has done better, right? So if you look at the only way Zimbabwe can progress is by being a critical society, being self-critical. It's not to say that there's nothing to celebrate, but it's just saying that we've really fallen behind. If you look at where we would have gone, there are really, really green shoots where we've done phenomenally well.
Absolutely.
If you look at the education sector and what we export, so, learners that we export, our individuals, the school kids that go international, the diasporan remittances, we punch way above our weight class. Could we do better? Yes. And I think that if we're more critical about what we can do better, to me, it's not a problem. It's actually at the center of what makes society better. Look at America. Look at continental Europe. When was the last time we had a good innovation coming out of continental Europe that made it on the world stage? Maybe France, you can think of one or two, but outside of France, maybe Skype. When was that?
That was
Right?
2004.
And somebody made, and I think it was you actually, who made this very interesting anecdote, nonetheless, but very interesting and thought-provoking, which was, if you look at the billionaire coming out of Europe, it's a guy who
Inherited it.
First, it's inheritance, and second, it's luxury goods. That is what concerns.
Yeah, the richest person in Europe is the owner of or the controlling shareholder of Louis Vuitton, Moët.
Yeah, exactly.
Moët Hennessy.
So if you think about it, what does it say? And you look at America, the richest, it's usually first generation and it's technology driven, right? And to me, I actually think it's because in America, that guy is insistently attacked. There is serious criticism of him, or maybe not criticism, but critique of what he's doing. So he's always on his toes. Whereas in Europe, nobody criticizes anymore.
But aren't we leaving some money on the table by not making enough noise about what's good here? For example, I'm a techie. I identify as a techie. I love technology. I love gadgets, and frankly, I'm hearing about some of what you've said for the first time. I didn't know that we have built some interesting products in Kenya that the whole world doesn't even recognize as Zimbabwean. And so, is that not also a failing, on our part in terms of just making noise about our wins, about the things that we are getting right, that where we are strong? And, if the rest of the world knew more about some of these things that we're doing really well, perhaps we would enjoy more investment, perhaps more of our youngsters. We were talking about A-level results last week and what kids should be thinking about getting into, whether career-wise and university-wise. If they're not aware of these stories, if they don't know that there are these great things that are happening right here at home, because I think the overarching theme of our advice to youngsters was do what will help you live and set up in a functional economy in Europe or the US or Australia or even South Africa. Because the outlook for employment and career development here is so bleak. But and the world, and one of the beauties of technology is that it has shrunk the world. So if you build a great software product right here in Harare, you can sell it all over the world, and it can be a really big thing. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
So firstly, I would like to agree with Tinashe about the need for there to be candid, honest criticism. We can only be a healthy nation if we did that. The only difference for me in terms of what you said about US, about Europe and all that is that while there is brutal criticism and freedom of speech, freedom of expression and all that, but the Americans are also very good at reminding you about how great they are and how good they are. So, you then have that balance. In our case, I see the scale kind of a little tilted, in the sense that when we have that constructive criticism, we then kind of drop our heads and maybe lose that little bit of confidence in terms of how we position ourselves at the top table, say in Africa. I've been at platforms where you have the guys from Nigeria articulating what they think they are capable of about their economy and all that. It was with a shock that I discovered the other time that they also have multiple exchange rates. They also have black market. But you don't hear them saying that. But us, we go out there and say,
these are our problems.
We have problems. Our country does not work because of this, that. Only when you scratch and scratch and scratch, you discover that, okay, these problems are actually not restricted to Zim. Not that we should accept that, no. But all I'm just saying is, when you are criticizing each other, it is okay. But when you are now going to compete on the continental stage, on the global stage, you need to kind of tone down and hold your heads up and say, we are capable. A lot of people that I do business with outside, even in our neighboring countries and all that, if they've never come to Zimbabwe, the conversation will be, the dynamics of the conversation will be one thing. If they then come over, you can see the surprise because of that perception, because we kind of go out there and create that perception that, we are kind of...
We've got nothing but problems here. We've got nothing to offer the world.
Yes. So, you name it, you go to Ghana, they've got their own issues, their markets and all that. You'd never imagine that their markets are so far behind in terms of sophistication. But if we are put there at the top table before we speak, and someone says we are going to hear, from a Zimbabwean guy and all that, they would not be,
excited.
Yes, they will not be excited.
The room won't be as full as when the Kenyan is talking, or the South African, or the Nigerian.
So, who is responsible for building our brand, the brand Zimbabwe? And the brand Zimbabwe is not to do with government. It's to do with us as a people. It is us, the way we carry ourselves, the confidence that we show, and we go there and take our place. So let's criticize each other, yes, but at the same time, the little positive that we have, let's also sing songs about it. And I feel I might be wrong, but I feel we don't do that enough.
So do you have an opinion in terms of do we? Is it a misplaced idea that we don't make enough noise about what's great about Zimbabwe?
I think that there's some truth to what Collen is saying. I would say that. So I'm trying to be politically correct.
What happened to Tinashe? Where's Tinashe? No, are you trying to be politically correct?
Yeah, I'm trying to be politically correct. But I would say that
that's not possible.
I'll still come back to there are certain societies that really what they're known for becomes dangerously, they pump themselves up to such a hype that they start being known for fake stories. Like Nigeria, for example, AFCON is running, right? Yeah. And, semis, you have South Africa versus Nigerians. And Nigerians on social media are pushing this idea that, yes, South Africa created Amapiano, but we made it better. And everybody's scratching their head like, I've never heard a Nigerian Amapiano. And these guys are claiming it as their own, right? So there's that risk. I think that at certain level, maybe not at government level, maybe not at political level, we don't celebrate our wins. But I think to a great extent, Strive Masiwa is well celebrated. So that's the politically correct thing that I wanted to say. That I think that we've really celebrated Strive Masiwa. We've really celebrated. So if you work in London or you work in New York or wherever, and you say you're a Zimbabwean, people look past the politics of Zimbabwe, right? And they will, you're trusted. You know,
your work ethic and your competence and intelligence.
Exactly.
Are not
you know, if you're knocking on doors, if you're knocking on international doors, and you're a Nigerian and you're a Zimbabwean, you're more trusted if you're Zimbabwean. So I think that the brand Zimbabwean is doing relatively well, I would say, but the brand Zimbabwe may not be doing so well.
But can you untangle the two? Because so I'm just going to speak a little bit from my perspective as a player in capital markets, where there is this perception, for example, that you can't move money to Zimbabwe because of sanctions. Now, I'm not going to go into the debate on whether the sanctions are good or bad. I'm just saying there's a perception, right, that you can't move money into Zimbabwe, right? And a lot of investment ideas just die at that point where somebody says, look, I've got this great opportunity and the potential investor asks, what's the geography, where is it in the world? And you say Zimbabwe, and they say, oh, no, we can't do business in Zimbabwe. It's on sanctions. And
but Rufaro, people have lost their money and they have not moved their money. Maybe not because of sanctions.
Yes, but what I'm saying
the reality is Nigeria, Ghana, despite their currency problems, you can still take your money out.
I think economies and businesses work in cycles. You have your bad times, good times, and all that. But I wanted to just respond to the issue of separation of the brand Zimbabwean versus Zimbabwe. To some extent, I agree with you. But what troubles me is the fact that out there, they are respecting the Zimbabwean and saying, you Zimbabwean, we like you, come and
work for us.
I want them to come to Zimbabwe for solutions. I want them to say Zimbabwe is a source of this solution. And this brand Zimbabwean is not doing enough to then also promote brand Zimbabwe.
Okay.
So that they come and do business here rather than, and I've come across this way, you're dealing with a counterparty and they're trying to sweet talk you to say, but aren't you wasting your time in Zim? Why don't you come over and we actually do this thing here? So they are separating the Zimbabwean from Zimbabwe, which I think we need to sort out.
Yeah, so that actually raises an interesting question that I think you're in a good place to address, which is, if you think about corporate Zimbabwe, the formal sector, and you think about the relationship between corporate Zimbabwe and government, and I think we've had this discussion many times where we've pointed out that there's distrust, for sure, between government and the business sector. And I think part of the reason why there is this distrust is because a lot of the business community, to the extent that we speak out, we are being critical. We're saying, you know what, this exchange rate policy doesn't work. This particular policy regarding who manufacturers can sell to doesn't work. And that's the only time they actually ever hear us, when we're actually saying there's a problem or this is not working. And we're never actually seen and heard celebrating Zimbabwe or making the case that he was talking about, to say, but you know what? You can build great software in Zimbabwe. And we, let's make noise about that. And going to the Ministry of Trade or whichever and saying, let's go around the world or to these conferences and sell Zimbabwe as a place where you can build great software or where you can have great tourism experiences. Or we're always, the corporate world doesn't seem to make these positive noises. In fact, if you just anecdotally use our show, for example, the episodes where we're actually talking about something great that's been done here versus the episodes where we've got our knickers in a knot about some policy misaction.
So I think there's some truth to that, but I also think that that's why we have Collen on the show. We're actually celebrating an entrepreneur who's gone out there. But I will still say that we don't have enough of entrepreneurs who've gone out there. Zimbabwe actually punches way above his weight class as far as entrepreneurs are concerned. And I think that on the Zimbabwe, how we could help the brand Zimbabwe is by more entrepreneurs going out there. We have more Zimbabweans who are going out there and becoming workers. But we don't have corporate Zimbabwe that's actually going out there. And yet the facts are that we've done phenomenally well. If you look at Liquid, if you look at the Insco Group, if you look at a number of our corporate that have actually gone out there, they've done phenomenally well. But I still think that it's just not enough. And the only way we can help brand Zimbabwe is by forgetting. Okay, here I'm going to be politically incorrect.
Yes, I don't mind. Tinashe's back.
Corporate Zimbabwe would benefit more by forgetting government, the state government of Zimbabwe, right? Because I think that they are pulling us backwards in a lot of ways. But there's nothing to stop corporate Zimbabwe from going out there and being very aggressive out there. Because if we do that, then these are Zimbabwean brands that we're promoting. You talked about Mazoe. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't even promote it even on a global scale. Because these are, and then maybe that's the way that we can actually promote corporate Zimbabwe. Look at tourism. Look at Victoria Falls. I think we've discussed this. There's absolutely no reason for us to wait for the tourism authority to promote Zimbabwe as far as Victoria Falls is concerned. But there are corporates in Victoria Falls that could do a far better job. And I think it is necessary for us to critique what they're doing already. Because I think that we could do a whole lot more as corporate Zimbabwe. And maybe that's the only way we can then promote Zimbabwe.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I think to be fair, my take is, we certainly need to make more positive noise about branding Zimbabwe in the corporate world. I don't know what the best forum is or what the best the detail, but I think just from a very high level, at a very global, from a very global perspective, I think the attitude must change. In as much as we mustn't be shy about things that aren't working and the what's in the system, but equally, I think we must also not be shy about what's great, what's really working. So maybe you could opine on what we were discussing last week in terms of kids. If you, as an entrepreneur who's done business across Africa, were advising somebody who recently finished the A-levels and they were thinking about the rest of their lives, what should they be studying, how can they continue, how can they take a path that will be relevant 5 years from now, 10 years from now, given the reality on the ground in Zimbabwe today and what's happening everywhere else in the world?
Well, I think opportunities largely arise out of problems around you across various sectors and all that. The reason why we would be having challenges or difficulties and all that, they are being caused by certain problems, and someone has to solve those problems. So at the moment, we have this waiting attitude generally to say, until currency stabilizes, for example, it's not a good idea to list. Yeah. How do you do the valuations? How do you do all such things? So we have become accustomed to justifying our reluctance to innovate and think outside the box. But, my view is, even if the economy is firing on all cylinders, and you do not do those basics to say, what problem can I solve? You have no chance. Now, if you have to do that in a thriving economy, if you go to South Africa, someone I started with may not have taken the path I have taken because it's firing and the economy is
things
okay,
work. So you just you just get a job and you work your way up the corporate ladder.
Yes. So the lack of those apparent problems have probably denied someone somewhere in South Africa an opportunity to actually, show their true potential. So, this is counterintuitive to say, in a situation where we have these problems, we're actually in a better situation if you are entrepreneurial, because the case for you to come up with a solution is very strong. So the case for you to say, there is no meaningful investment banking, and we have a problem, and we need an investment banking solution, because there is someone who is importing, cooking oil, and they have a market, and they are pushing volumes. This guy is thriving on the fact that information asymmetry, for example, is what is making him thrive. But is that a sustainable strategy? Why don't I innovate and sit with this guy and say, yes, you can continue doing this as long as these conditions support you, but use this space and opportunity to now structure, and I can give you ideas and all that. So can't we have specific and unique solutions that speak to our current challenges? So that is basically how I would advise a youngster coming out of university to say, I was reading about how the capital market in India thrives, for example. And you see huge volumes going through in terms of their transactions. The liquidity is very huge. And we always assume that liquidity must come out of active participation of institutional investors. India has this huge population, and financial inclusion is a big thing. So you then have someone who just innovates and decides that, look, the guy sitting in a small kiosk in a place like Mbare, selling fake hair and all that, can have a small screen and become an agent of a stockbroker. And as they go about their business and he's entertaining his customers, he can just tell them, there's an IPO open. Here is my platform. Can you subscribe? And he shows you the screen there, small screen. So somebody saw an opportunity to create that agents network for broking, investment banking, that's what they call it. And slowly they started building certain critical mass of mass participation. So that's basically what we are looking at here to say, there is money that circulates in our informal sector. Remittances are coming in, sizable remittances, bigger than Kenya.
So why are we not doing it? Because that's a brilliant idea. You're part of the capital markets, and this is a question for you, both of you. Why are we not doing it? Why are we not liberalizing? What I'm hearing is liberalization of the capital markets, make it very attractive for the small guy, and invariably you're making it attractive for entrepreneurs to then actually list, and invariably you're creating an opportunity for investment bankers. Why is it not happening then?
I have one answer: C-Trade. That is the first step.
Okay.
Then I come to Rufaro and say, I have C-Trade, I have done piloting, and anybody can, access any of our 3 exchanges. Now even a commodity exchange. 2 days ago.
Sorry, just for the benefit of our audience, who might not be familiar with what C-Trade is. So C-Trade is basically a SMS-based platform where anybody can open an account with a stockbroker and buy shares on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, on the Victoria Falls Stock Exchange, on the FinTech Stock Exchange, and the ticket sizes to open an account and trade are quite affordable. They're reachable to most Zimbabweans, and you don't actually have to physically visit a stockbroker. You just set it up on your cell phone, and you don't have to have a smartphone. It will work on a feature phone, and you load up your account and you can buy shares. So Collen and his company built C-Trade, and it's actually live as we speak, and it works and it's functional. So he is definitely at the coalface of bringing that kind of innovation into Zimbabwe. So, sorry.
Yeah. So it's not an easy space, because you are talking investment, you are talking, and in a distressed economy, of course, there's quite a lot of selling to do. But I was just giving an example to say C-Trade may not be the best there is, and there will ever be. There is a brilliant youngster out there who has just graduated with his financial engineering degree. He understands these things. But what is on his mind is how best can I get into Standard Chartered Bank, investment banking and all that. And we are churning out many of these coming through. If we can have those guys coming up with multiple versions of C-Trade, ensuring that in Masvingo there is an immediate access to capital markets. And capital markets, I don't think it's all about you are looking for blue chip stocks and you want to make money. Capital markets are where enterprise must meet capital. The source of capital should not only be foreign investors and institutional investors. It must be us retail market players. As long as the risk issues are dealt with, as long as convenience and efficiency is there, as long as returns are almost guaranteed, you can make a case to all the population or our citizens that are transacting or conducting economic activity informally, but who must be reminded that the day will come when you are 80, 70, and you can no longer have the energy. What is going to happen to you? Every time you have $10 in your pocket, do you ever stop to think what would happen if you break your leg and all that? So it may not necessarily be one person, but it has to be the thinking that is, put into our people as they go through our education system. To say there are two options: you can go and become a well-paid executive in a bank, but at the same time, you can solve a problem, a catastrophe that we are facing in the next 20, 30 years when we all start retiring and the pension situation is what it is. It's a very, very important case to create such, ideas. The framework, the one thing that people overlook is that the legal and regulatory framework, it is there, but we don't read it. If you read the Collective Investment Schemes Act, we're talking about SACCOs, we're talking about those things. It's one of the most underutilized pieces of legislation, because you think deposit taking is about just getting a banking license where you go and deposit a huge amount of money. But collective investment scheme is a deposit taking structure, open-ended, for example, and you place the funds. And if you are worried about equity risks, the appetite for debt financing in areas that are really, really strong and safe, if we just talk of agricultural space, we have shortage of meal at the moment, or maize. So it is those opportunities that you then say, why can't we take advantage of that and then innovate around the frameworks that are already there? What they require now is someone to now come and find one small piece that small chunk that they can chew. And if we then extrapolate to the majority of us with all different ideas, we don't have to wait for when the currency stabilizes. That initiative is what can stabilize the currency. We make the mistake of thinking someone is sitting at the Reserve Bank is the one who is going to make a decree and say, now the currency is stable. No, it is our economic activity. Are we formalizing these millions that are coming?
Well, up until Old Mutual is suspended from the exchange.
So I actually want to pick up the baton from him in terms of problems being opportunities. And I want to pose a challenge to the corporate executives in the audience. And the question to, Tinashe is part of that challenge, because, we seem to be on opposite ends of the pessimism, optimism spectrum. I'm an eternal optimist, and you tend to be much more pessimistic. And one of the things in my thinking around 2024 is that the challenges that the government has, which is why, if you look at the budget that was released last year and some of the policy action around VAT and who manufacturers can sell to, they speak to something that is obvious to anybody who just looks at it, that they need cash. They have a cash squeeze. They need to increase their revenues. And I actually think that this is a fantastic opportunity for the corporate world to come up with solutions that are good for corporates and also good for the state, in that the state increases its revenue. So the obvious, macroeconomic version of this is just to lobby for policies that are good for the formal sector, so that the formal sector steals market share from the informal sector.
Yeah.
And if that happens, because the informal sector does not pay taxes and the formal sector does, the state will automatically benefit.
Yeah.
But coming to what we're the technology, this specific sector that we are talking about, and I'll just use an example of what happened in Kenya, where they got very frustrated. I'm talking about the government here, with their ability to collect taxes from their equivalent of combis. I don't know whether they call them combis or they've got another name for them over there.
Matatu.
The matatus,
Yeah.
right? And they eventually decided, because of the pervasiveness of mobile wallets, that it would be illegal for a licensed combi to accept cash. They must all have a mobile wallet, which is registered with the state, and the state had a presumptive tax. I don't remember offhand what the percentage it was. And everybody who uses a combi in Kenya pays into this mobile wallet, and automatically at the end of the month or whatever it is, the state takes its presumptive tax. And I'm pretty sure that in this market, the combis don't contribute to the fiscus, right? And this is a technological solution. I think Eco Cash has 6 million plus accounts. Everybody,
Yeah.
who, or pretty much every adult has an account. These are some of the solutions from that make sense from a technology standpoint, but they'll also benefit the state's capacity to collect taxes. And the other innovation, I think, it's in Kenya, is anybody from their cell phone can buy a treasury bill. They can buy $10 worth, $20 worth, and an interest. They don't have to go to a bank and open a money market account and that sort of thing. So I think there are opportunities for the corporate sector, and I'll put the challenge to them. And I think because necessity is the mother of invention, they're going to try these things.
But you're still not addressing the question, and I want you guys to address it.
Yeah.
That you're coming up with all these innovations, but in Kenya, Old Misho is not suspended. So you've allowed these Sekuru or Mbuya from the back of Beyond to invest on the stock market, and they've decided that the level of risk that they're willing to take is an Old Misho, right? And they invested, and come tomorrow, Old Misho is suspended, and it has been suspended for how long? And that Mbuya was going to use that money for her school fees or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's the reason why it doesn't work here, and it works in Kenya. And I am saying that we should address those. That's the elephant in the room. Address it, and you might find that your innovation will have lots of people, lots of takers. It doesn't have lots of takers because there are these structural rigidities that are in place. For example, this circuit break that has been introduced, I think that's a retrogressive piece of legislation. And the market, you guys are in the market. I don't know why you're not speaking against it. Because if you do so, you're going to find more and more people will be willing to trade. But they're not, because they realize that if you're in a hyperinflationary environment, and you tell me that a stock can only go up by 10%.
Well, the circuit breakers limits were changed.
What's the limit now?
Well, it used to be 10%. I think they're much broader than that. There was a quiet announcement. It wasn't actually quiet. It was published. It's in the public domain.
How much is it?
I don't know offhand, but
there you go. But what I'm saying is, it should never have been there, right? Because this is a hyperinflationary environment, and you can't expect to be selling these investment proposals when there are these structural rigidities, regulatory rigidities that make it impossible for people to trade.
I completely empathize with everything you've just said, but I think that the spirit of what Collen has said, and which I want to embrace and apply to my thinking going forward, is that I think everybody in Zimbabwe is alive to these challenges, to these problems, to the policy inconsistencies, to the policies that don't work. And we've discussed them here. In fact, that's pretty much almost all that we do, right? But notwithstanding that, rather significantly less than ideal framework that we live and operate in, there are still opportunities to innovate, to do clever things, and make progress, right? It's not the case that we should just say, well, you know what? There's so much that's broken that it's not worth getting out of bed in the morning. We should just all cry ourselves to sleep and wallow in self-pity. No, we still have agency, and we still have an obligation to lobby and make noise about some of the positive things that we can do.
We don't live in an isolated world.
Right? Agreed. Yeah.
Today, you're telling me, because I earn most Zimbabweans, and you hop on this. Most Zimbabweans are now earning in US dollars. 83% or some is in US
probably
dollars.
More. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Probably more. Right. It means you're going to the same person and saying invest on the ZSE, but the same person can invest on the New York Stock Exchange. And if you look at the S&P, the return on the S&P 500
yeah,
on the last 10 years.
Over the last 60 years.
So those are the people you're competing with. So I'm actually not a pessimist, because I'm saying to that same individual, that same Buya, that actually there's been a notch on Tesla that it can go up 10 times. Right?
So what I can, sorry to interject.
No, this is bar talk, so you can interject at any time.
So I hear you. Mm-hmm. So if every one of us identifies what is wrong about our environment, and that speaks to the policy makers and authorities and all that, and we really eloquently point out to say, with these conditions, we don't have a chance, and we're all saying that. The question is, one, how do we expect them to act? Do we assume that what we are considering obvious is equally obvious to everyone? If it is not, what are we doing about making the case? And what I'm trying to get to is that do we do enough as private sector to organize ourselves and articulate our position, our recommendations, our ask in a very well structured and organized manner? Then you turn around and say, we have managed to articulate with data, with all that. If it is happening, I'm not so sure on which platforms it is happening. Mm-hmm. If it is not, that's, for me, the first challenge we have to take on ourselves, to say, in what forum, in what way. I know there will be workshops and all that, but the problem with the workshop, you go there, people talk, and you go back to your normal settings. So is there a structured way in which we tackle that and we take a position from the private sector? Secondly, even if in the absence of that, is there a way in which you can navigate and come up with solutions in spite of those challenges?
Yeah, I'll give you the last word. It looks like the producer. We're having so much fun here. The time runs away from us. Unfortunately, I think we could easily do another hour. But yeah,
okay. I think what I got from this conversation is, yes, there are some brilliant individuals and brilliant companies that are doing phenomenally well, and we should really project that in the international market. But my pushback is there a lot of innovations that are happening in the capital markets and everything that you guys are doing, right? But perhaps that's to Collen's point, that we must be in a structured, there must be a structured way in which we, as corporate Zimbabwe, go to the state, to the regulator, and say, this does not make sense. Mm-hmm. We're competing against South Africa. Mm-hmm. You can invest on the JSE. There are margin accounts on the JSE. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that you can do, derivatives, everything that you can do. Because if I'm making US dollars, there's the global market. I can invest anywhere in the world, and I'll be given credit, which I can't and this was a question, and I would like Colin to have the last word because there's something that's been bothering me that I have to ask him.
Okay.
Right? That you can't borrow against script in Zimbabwe. Now you're talking about all these innovations, right? And if I'm an entrepreneur, there's no incentive for me to list because, I can't get liquidity off my shareholding. People who I think would like to, invest in me are finding it very difficult because, well, they can't borrow against that script. Why can't we? Why is that not happening? What's the problem there? Because in Kenya it's possible, in Ghana it's possible, in South Africa it's possible, in the US it's possible, but we can't.
Well, it's possible here, and products are being put together for on that. In terms of the Securities Act, are you aware that a warehouse receipt is now a security as well? And the idea of a warehouse receipt is you can borrow against that security. And that.
So let me get that clear. Yes, right now, I can borrow against script in Zimbabwe.
You can.
Is that true?
Yes.
Really? So, and who's lending?
Okay.
No. The legacy banks are very conservative, and they're not alive to some of these things that are possible. So they don't do it.
Yeah.
But
so
it is possible.
Who's lending?
It is possible. So he's building products that are going to take advantage of that opportunity.
So that's going to happen. So right now there's no one. If I have a Delta share certificate right now and I want to borrow against it, where do I go?
If you want to borrow, you go to the financial institution, and there is a process in which that lien is registered through the depository, through the transfer secretaries. So I run a share transfer secretary. We actually have a record of the.
So if liens. I was willing to lend you money, I could place a lien on your certificate and lend you.
Yeah.
But the banks aren't doing it. That's your point, right?
Yeah.
So it's not in the public domain that I can take my certificate to a bank and
because that could change
and draw cash. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not a policy problem.
Yeah.
It's actually
no. Yeah. True. But why is it not happening? Because in Kenya it's happening.
Because the banks are not excited about it.
Or
why not?
Someone needs to create that product.
Okay.
Why
why hasn't someone created it?
Well, he is. He's in the middle of it.
Are you creating the platform or you're creating the lending facility?
So the lending facility is something that the bank has to look at in terms of their products. What I'm providing is a platform in which you actually can borrow against an asset, financial asset or real estate asset.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. No. Look. Unfortunately, we could go on, and we certainly must have you back sometime this year when you've launched some of your products and to inform our audience, because I think that there's a dearth of exciting products in our capital markets, and certainly, our audience will be interested in hearing what you have to offer and how they can unlock it. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, as always. Have a great weekend. Be good. If you can't be good at it. Cheers.